the f did I just read? And that brings us to today's video. Hi, and welcome to Reasons Why I Think Lost in the Cloud was a name more deserving for a burning trash fire rather than an actual manhwa. For those who don't know, Lost in the Cloud is an ongoing BL manhwa about the male lead, Cyrus, finding the secret pictures that the main character, Skyla, took of his crush, Chanel. While Skyla thinks that his secret is safe with Cyrus, he continuously finds himself in a more troublesome situation than the last, making him question Cyrus's true motives. Currently, the manhwa has 2 seasons, with the third one being in the making. At the time of writing the script, I have only read 2 seasons and will review 1 season in this video and the second in the next one. Maybe after reading season 3, I'll think of Lost in the Cloud in a new, cleaner, and better light. But considering the absurd stuff that happens in the first 2 seasons, I highly doubt it. In fact, I'll be surprised if after reading season 3, I won't be calling every mental hospital in my vicinity. Considering the length of this manhwa, I will split the review and recap into parts. Recap of season 1, review of season 1 based on plot, characters, and romance, and in the next video, recap of season 2, review of season 2, and finally, my overall opinion on the 2 seasons also based on plot, characters, and romance. Before we start typing out your death threats, I want to make it clear this is not me sending hate to the creator or fandom. This video is purely my opinion on the manhwa, and most of the comments I make are jokes. I don't wish to shame anyone for liking Lost in Cloud, and I also don't want to upset anyone for disliking it or start any fights because of it. Also, major trigger warning for essay and abuse. If you feel uncomfortable at any point of this video, please feel free to skip or click off. Other than that, please enjoy. We start with the first chapter with Skyla eating with his mother when the two finish and she reminds Skyla to take his medication, which results in him asking to stop going to some doctor's appointments he had, but dropping the subject soon after his mother starts to get worried. Later at school, Skyla leaves to go to discuss some matters with his teacher and, like an idiot, leaves his files that have pictures of his crush, Chanel, that he unconsensually took, unattended. Chanel's best friend, Cyrus, finds these pictures and wants to tell Chanel about it, but realizes that he can be a manipulative pig with them, and decides to keep it for himself. He doesn't keep it for long, since he starts blackmailing Skyla for an anonymous number and tells him that he has the pictures. Skyla later figures out that the anonymous texts were from Cyrus, and confronts him about it. After Skyla makes a complete mockery of himself and gets confirmation from Cyrus that he'll keep it a secret, he thanks Cyrus and promises to do anything he wants. Cyrus becomes somewhat of a psychopath and torments Skyla using various methods, like pretending to spill the secret in the bathroom to his friends and pretending to show the pictures to Chanel, when he really just showed a picture of his white fluffy dog, Candy. Oh yeah, this is Candy, by the way. She's literally the best and only morally good character in this entire manhwa. But Cyrus suddenly gets a moral awakening and calls Skyla over to his house with the intention of returning his photos. Skyla almost gets an aneurysm when he sees how rich Cyrus is and runs to the bathroom. Surprisingly, he doesn't shit himself, and instead looks into the mirror and calms down. Stepping into Cyrus's room, Skyla sees Candy for the first time and loses all his self-respect apparently by baby talking to the dog. Cyrus, similar to how I felt every time Skyla went on screen, gets secondhand embarrassment and mocks Skyla before proposing a deal. The deal being that if Skyla does something for him, he would delete a number of the pictures from his flash drive, corresponding to the thing he asked Skyla to do. Skyla hesitates for a bit, but soon accepts the deal and watches Skyla delete some of the pictures. When Cyrus gets distracted by his dog, Skyla gets gifted a few brain cells from thin air and takes the flash drive and makes a run for it. Cyrus, bewildered by the sudden move, runs after him and latches onto his collar, making the two of them fall down the stairs. Covered in blood, Cyrus takes the flash drive back while Skyla asks him why Cyrus is doing this to him. We get this kind of foreshadowing panel before Cyrus explains that he wants to find out more about Skyla and follows it up with a questioning how a guy can feel romantic interest towards another guy because Skyla is gay. So I can understand asking questions about a topic that you don't really understand and are curious about. But Cyrus, could you have really not worded it in any other way? Skyla gets weirded out by this line of questioning from Cyrus, and when Cyrus asks him if Chanel was the first guy he's ever liked, we get this small snippet of Skyla's backstory before he becomes equally as insane as Cyrus and asks Cyrus if he thinks of him as a joke. The quarrel ends with Skyla storming out of the house and leaving Cyrus covered in blood. As the maid tries to help Cyrus, he answers Skyla's questions to himself and confirms that his own questions were in fact serious. Later, as Cyrus is looking at the pills that Skyla dropped during their feud, a maid comes in and informs that his father is looking for him. After some worrying from his father about his head injury, his stepmother, Jisoo, comes in and assures the father that the two are getting along and taking good care of each other. Cyrus passive-aggressively backs this up. Cyrus sits down with his family to eat dinner and for the sake of his father and his own peace, plays the role of an obedient son and even suggests that his father takes his wife out on a date. As Cyrus is sitting in his room, his stepmother comes in and places a plate with fruit on his table while asking about Skyla. Cyrus, seemingly seeping steam from his ears, tells the stepmother to leave and comments on how she's still acting like a caring mother even when his father isn't around, resulting in Jisoo confessing that she too doesn't think of him in a nice manner and is only putting up with his persona for his father. Before leaving the room, she scratches his chin and threatens him to keep up this good boy persona if he wants his father to treat him as nicely as he does now. We cut to Skyla starting in a co-studying space when he finds a cup of coffee and steps onto the balcony to take a break. As he's taking a sip, Cyrus calls him and asks to meet up the following day. The next day, before Skyla meets up with Cyrus, he ends up reminiscing about his past with Chanel and how it led to the situation he's in now. During the flashback, we see him acting cold, distant, and some might even say a bit rude to Chanel, making Chanel act all timid and kind of bashful to him in response. This non-stop behavior tugs at Skyla's heartstrings, and so he slowly warms up to Chanel and soon falls for him. Flashback ends as Skyla arrives at the spa. Cyrus notices and tells him he needs Skyla's help to get rid of a woman he doesn't especially like. Left with no other options and still tormented by the fact that Cyrus has the photos, Skyla agrees and follows him. The two walk together until Cyrus meets his stepmother, who's hanging out with her friends on their way. He pushes the befuddled Skyla towards her and introduces him as the person who came the previous day. Jisoo's friends look like they've heard a government secret when Cyrus starts calling his stepmother Mom. Skyla just kinda stands there while Jisoo tries to dismiss the confrontation that the relationship she's in is serious and tells Cyrus to have fun with his friend. Cyrus is quick to respond that him and Skyla aren't friends and are in fact dating, which is obviously a lie. He can't pull bitches. He goes as far as to intertwine his fingers with Skyla's and kisses his hand. This causes Skyla to feel uncomfortable. Jisoo tries to shoo away the two and notices how uncomfortable Skyla is and points it out, saying that if Cyrus wanted to trick her, then he should have at least told his friend about it. Cyrus finally realizes how uncomfortable Skyla is when we get this panel I hate most. In fact, this is the panel that inspired me to make this video, and also inspired me to not put any faith into this relationship. The forced, non-consensual making out scene with Skyla and Cyrus. Honestly, I'm filled with shame that I even have this screenshot saved. Call me crazy, but I can't see how you can fall for someone who forced a kiss on you and blackmailed you. And this goes without saying, but Cyrus is deranged for doing that. Whether it was to prove a point and to get Jisoo to move out, or even if it was some hidden desire, it does not give Cyrus the right to do that, and I'm tired of ignoring that. Sure, Cyrus is a character with complex backstory and personality, considering his family life, loss of mother, and own SA experiences. But that doesn't mean that we should just ignore the literal essay he selfishly inflicted onto Skyla just because he has a depressing backstory or is good looking. Cyrus had no excuse to do that, and I'm so tired of brushing that off. He falls a kiss onto Skyla, making the other trigger a flashback to the sexual assault he experienced in middle school and throw up on Cyrus. Jisoo had already left when Skyla vomited onto Cyrus and left the two of them alone. Cyrus, seeing that Skyla reacted so poorly, asked if he thought of him as a dirty person or as a disease. As Skyla tries to tell him that he has the wrong idea, Cyrus cuts him off and tells him to cry and vomit at her so as to not ruin his good mood. And with that, Cyrus leaves. Skyla goes back to his house and retches in his bathroom, causing his sister, Hyeon, I really hope I pronounced that right, to wake up. Hyeon is worried and asks Skyla if he's having a relapse and if he should go back to the hospital. To which Skyla says no and begs her to keep it a secret from their mother. His sister reluctantly agrees. The next day, Skyla takes the medication on an empty stomach and suffers consequences because of it, resulting in him doing poorly on a midterm exam. His homeroom teacher calls Skyla in and the two talk it over before letting him go. Skyla sits down on a staircase and cries before calming down and going to gym class. In gym, the teacher instructs Cyrus to teach Skyla about badminton. Cyrus starts explaining that when Skyla gets reminded of the previous day and compares it to his previous SA experiences, irritating him. Cyrus continues talking when Skyla cuts him off and beats him up with a tennis racket. Sadly, this is just a daydream, and Cyrus didn't get a good beating. Skyla snaps back to reality when he heard his name getting called by Cyrus. Irritated and disappointed, Skyla asks to go to the nurse's office and leaves. Later that day, Cyrus notices Skyla walking up the stairs and decides to mess with him. Cyrus runs after Skyla and gets all up in his face with questions like, are you mad, and if that was his first kiss. Seeing Skyla ignore him, Cyrus only gets more fired up and decides to put his face right in front of Skyla's. Skyla, having endured so much of this mindless blabbling, punches Cyrus and pins him to the wall. He starts confessing to him that Cyrus makes him sick and that he ruined his chances of going to college. This motherfucker rolls his eyes at Skyla and continues to tease him, asking if the kiss was so good that it distracted Skyla from his studies. This just pisses Skyla off more and he punches Cyrus a second time. In return, Cyrus pins Skyla to the wall and intends to punch him back when he notices two students coming up the stairs. He puts on his good boy persona and pats Skyla on the shoulder, telling him not to run on the stairs as he did so. As the two students leave, Skyla calls out to Cyrus and tells him that he's not done yet talking. He calls out Cyrus's fake boy persona and asks him if that's because he's aware that something is wrong with his personality, throwing in a sarcastic compliment there as well. The final string snaps when Skyla tells Cyrus that he feels bad for him, making the other pull his collar and drag Cyrus's face towards his. Skyla tries to push Cyrus away, but he catches his wrist and leans in. Skyla turns his head away, and after a moment, Cyrus lets him go and calls him a liar, adding that he doesn't feel bad for him, but is afraid of him. With that lovely ending, the two part ways. As Cyrus is on the train, he starts to think about how he underestimated Skyla, saying that he has a bad mouth and is pretty violent. He starts to think about what he wanted from Skyla when the conductor announces the stop and he leaves the train. While greeting in the company of Chanel, Jiwoon, Yu-chan, Jigyum, and Sungyoon, I really hope I pronounced those right, Cyrus remembers Skyla's remark about his personality. In his head, he tells Skyla that there is nothing wrong with him, and that he's the weird one. Cyrus and company sit down to eat, and as the other three are talking, Cyrus sits in silence and doesn't eat anything. Bored, he starts thinking about what Skyla saw in Chanel, and even questioning if it was Chanel who had kissed Skyla, if he would have reacted differently. After a kind suggestion from Chanel that gets rejected, Cyrus goes back to thinking about Skyla, believing that he still needs Skyla. Cyrus comes up with another trick to use instead of threatening. Since there's a school trip soon, the company decides to play at an internet cafe to see who sleeps with who. After a relatively weird conversation about feet that I'm going to skip, Cyrus switches himself out in order to be in the same group as Skyla. During the school trip, as the group is getting situated in their rooms, Skyla gives Cyrus a death stare upon realizing that he is now in the same group as him. Cyrus responds with a happy smile. As his friend Jigyum tries to convince Cyrus to change rooms, Cyrus rebuttals and tells him that the groups have already been finalized while trying to help Skyla carrying his bags. However, Skyla doesn't let him and tells him to leave it alone. After a small commotion with Jigyum, Cyrus and Skyla head inside the room, where Cyrus continues to offer Skyla help. Skyla, who has already been suspicious of the Curder's behavior, asks him what he wants from him. In response, Cyrus just tells him that he really does want to help. Skyla replies that he knows he doesn't mean that and suddenly leaves, leaving Cyrus kind of stunned. As Skyla is out in the hallway, he tells himself that he should just ignore Cyrus, as talking with him would only make things worse. We get a cut to Skyla's home, where his mother decides to clean his room. As she's tidying his desk, she finds a test in which he failed. As she's looking at it, she feels something underneath and moves the pages to find his medication. In shock, she moves the rest of the books off the shelf to find packs of his medication that he has not taken. Back on the trip, the other men in Skyla's group suggest pushing all the beds and sleeping on one big bed together. Cyrus, contrary to his very fruity tendencies, tries to discourage them by proposing that one of them sleeps on the floor. However, none of the other men seem to want to do so. As Cyrus is about to let them continue their plans, Skyla pitches in and says that he'll be the one to sleep on the sofa and leaves the room. Due to this, the men keep the beds where they were. Later in the night, Cyrus tries to sleep but constantly gets interrupted by his bedmates snoring and his gifted manhood. Unable to endure any longer, Cyrus slips out of the room and goes into the living room, where he finds Skyla asleep. We get a beautiful shot of Cyrus admiring Skyla's peaceful face, before waking him up and sending him off to the room with his previous bedmate. Skyla gets up and leaves without a word. This cold behavior disturbs Cyrus, and as he's trying to fall back asleep, he notices the messages from Hyun on Skyla's phone. After looking them over, he simply puts the phone on the floor and asks himself why it's such a big deal that if Skyla took his meds or not. Next morning, as Skyla's in the bathroom, washing his face and getting ready, Cyrus enters the bathroom and annoys him a bit, in need of a reaction. However, Skyla leaves the restroom without responding to him, which completely shocks Cyrus. During the rest of the trip, Cyrus and Skyla hang out separately, with Cyrus hanging out with his friend group and Skyla hanging out with Dong-sik and Jinghu. With Dong-sik and his two friends, basically. In the evening, Cyrus informs Skyla and his group about the upcoming talent show when Skyla gets up and strolls to the bathroom. Cyrus, unhappy about the lack of drama and violence in his life, gets lost and falls on the couch. As he thinks about Skyla's weird behavior, Chanel spooks him and reminds him that he would be performing at a talent show. As the two are separated, Skyla tells his friends that he won't go to the talent show and calls his sister. Having heard that Skyla would be absent, Cyrus decides to head into their room and check up with him, only to find Skyla, once again, asleep. Cyrus sits in front of Skyla, and after pushing all his messy hair out of his face, admires his quiet and calm appearance. He He picks up Skyla's glasses and mocks them before trying them on and giving us one of the finest panels yet. After 5 separate times of him taking the glasses on and off, Cyrus finds out that they're not prescribed and calls him a weirdo. A bit later, he wakes Skyla up and invites him to the show. Cyrus brings Skyla to a hidden balcony in the assembly hall, where the show is taking place. He sits down and after some hesitation and hostility from Skyla, he sits down as well. As the two watch Channel perform, Skyla realizes that he hasn't interacted with him much lately. He begins to muse over his life, his relationship with his abuser, Manwha, the middle school incident. He slowly realizes that he has been projecting Manwha onto Channel and had been unknowingly using him as a way to get rid of his guilt over Manwha. He had run away from his abuser but kept dwelling on the past. Skyla begins to sadly cry as he realizes this. After the performance is over, Cyrus yawns, sadly happy that it's over. He reaches for Skyla, telling him to get up, but freezes when he realizes that he's crying. He retracts his hand, completely dumbfounded that Skyla was moved that much by performance, and believes that Skyla is completely head over heels for Channel. As the two are walking back to the room, Cyrus tries to provoke Skyla, but the other doesn't reply to his teases and simply asks Cyrus what he wants from him. Skyla returns home to his mother screaming at him for being selfish and not taking his medicine, which results in Skyla thinking that nothing has changed since middle school and that he can't escape his past no matter what. Next day at school, the class finds out that Skyla didn't make it into the top 10 when the teacher was announcing the midterm results, surprising all of them. In general, after the trip, Skyla acts very distracted and distant at school and even declines an invite from Channel to hang out with his photography club during the weekend. Channel notices the behavior and becomes worried about Skyla, making him want to help Skyla in any way he can. Channel is later at a bookstore buying books on music composition. When he notices Skyla buying some books for his studies, Channel worries about him and tries to get his mind off things by reminding him that the two haven't had a photography lesson in some time. But Skyla requests that the two of them stop doing photography lessons together, to which Channel responds positively to. Skyla starts to leave, but gets interrupted by Channel grabbing him and asking to hang out the following weekend as a thank you for all the lessons. 3 days later, Skyla is struggling to find a way to cancel the plans. As he's typing, he gets a message from Channel saying that he's already left. Realizing that it's too late, Skyla heads out. As Skyla is waiting for Channel, he makes plans to go study at the library before returning home, as he wants to avoid running into his mother as best as he can. Channel arrives, and the two greet each other before heading to a restaurant. While eating, Channel shows Skyla the pictures he took, and Skyla compliments all of them, but suddenly gets turned off by a picture of Cyrus and hands Channel back his phone. The two move on and hang out until early evening. While resting on a bench, Channel suggests getting dinner together, but Skyla decides that he should leave. After reminiscing for a bit, Channel tells Skyla that he had fun and that they should hang out again. Skyla doesn't respond. He instead thinks about how he doesn't know if his feelings for Channel are genuine or if they're still remnants for what he had for Manwha, as Channel resembles Manwha. As the two get up from the bench and begin walking, Skyla begins to reminisce about his past. We're then shown more of Skyla's backstory with Manwha, including how he met him, got along with him, and eventually went to the same middle school with him. In middle school, as the two are walking down the street, Manwha gets called over by his friend group and goes over to them with Skyla. As Manwha is catching up with his gangster friends, Skyla is offered a cigarette, which he takes for the sake of not bringing Manwha any trouble. Later in the flashback, we find out that Skyla's parents got divorced. Skyla took it poorly at first, but he got used to it over time by spending more time out of the house. Sitting alone at home, Hyun realizes that she's hungry and goes to boil a pot of water before getting distracted by the TV. Engrossed in the TV show she was watching, Hyun notices a weird smell and sees that the pot literally caught on fire and got burned. She tries to remove the pot off the stove, but ends up spilling boiling water on herself. Skyla hears about what happened and rushes to the hospital to find out that his sister got second-degree burns on her stomach and thighs. His mother begins yelling at him for not preparing her food beforehand, and while Skyla is trying to defend himself, a doctor comes up and interrupts them. As time went on, Skyla got into more and more arguments with his mother, mostly due to him skipping or being late to school. But one day, his mother busts into his room and confronts him about the lighter in his school uniform. Skyla tries to defend himself, but in the heat of the moment he ends up screaming at his mother that she was the reason his father left. Realizing his mistake, Skyla bolts out the room and runs over to Manwha's house. As Skyla is venting about his mom, Manwha suggests going to the same college together later on in life, but Skyla jokingly dismisses him and says that he wants to make new friends. Unhappy by the answer, Manwha grabs his and kisses his cheek. Skyla is caught off guard by his actions and tells him to cut it out, but over time his feelings towards Manwha start to unknowingly change. We get a 2-year time skip and see Skyla treating his classmate, Jongho, in a rough manner. First, he yells at him after a football game. Then, he smacks the back of his head for using another person's data, making Jungho angry and begin to hold grudges. Later, as Minwoo and Skyla sit together on a bus stop, Minwoo tells Skyla to calm down a bit and to hold her out until graduation, because after graduation, the two of them will stop hanging out with their other friends. Minwoo also asks that the two of them will still continue to be friends and calls their friendship special, which tugs at Skyla's heart. Minwoo invites Skyla over to his house, and after a heated 3-hour-long gaming session, the two of them order some fried chicken. As Skyla begins to eat, Minwoo walks over and places a bottle of whiskey in front of them. The two take a drink, and after realizing that it's too strong for them, decide to mix it in with some other drinks. By the time the bottle is finished, Minwoo is sleeping on the couch and Skyla is drunk. Skyla looks over to the resting Minwoo, and as Skyla remembers all the kind things he said to him, he lays a kiss onto Minwoo's lips. As Skyla's in the moment, Minwoo wakes up and in an enraged tone asks him what's he doing. Skyla is trying to explain himself and tries to brush it off as a drunken mistake, but gets kicked out by Minwoo. Skyla runs away and starts questioning to himself if what he did was truly because of the alcohol, or if it was something more serious. But because of his internalized homophobia, he denies the possibility of him being gay and just hopes that Minwoo doesn't remember what happened that night. However, the next day at school, Minwoo doesn't even look at Skyla when he returns the shirt that he left at his house, confirming Skyla's suspicions of him remembering. He then texts Minwoo and tells him to meet up after class. In Minwoo's classroom, Skyla begins to apologize and tell him that he really didn't know what he was doing, when Minwoo starts using my favorite tactics, gaslighting and manipulation. Minwoo starts telling Skyla how he didn't really mind the kiss, and was even willing to do it a second time if it was with Skyla. Skyla thinks that he's joking, but Minwoo continues suggesting that they kiss a second time to figure out their emotions. Swayed by his proposal, Skyla confesses that he too didn't hate the kiss, and says that he's willing to do it. If you have read Lost in the Cloud, you know where this is going and what a bad destination it is. As he's fumbling with the cloth over his eyes, Skyla asks Minwoo why he's blindfolded. Minwoo tells him that he's simply too embarrassed to do it normally because it's his first kiss and asks not to waste any more time. Skyla nods and like an innocent bunny sits and waits for Minwoo's lips to meet his. But what actually meets him is much worse. As Skyla spaces out by this sensation, he notices that his lips are getting smothered with drool. Alarmed, Skyla tries to push the person off himself, and after some struggle, he takes off his blindfold to see Minwoo sitting behind him with a judgmental gaze. Skyla begins to realize that the one who kissed him wasn't Minwoo at all and starts to cry. As Skyla is trembling in disgust, Minwoo laughs at him and thanks him for pretending to be his friends all these years before leaving the classroom. Later that night, Skyla comes to Minwoo's house and brings him outside to talk things over. Skyla asks him why he did that and if Minwoo is satisfied now, to which Minwoo replies that he saw Skyla as a brother. Minwoo starts to explain that he saw Skyla as family, and looking back at every memory with him and just realizing that Skyla liked him in a different way made him want to puke. The two throw a couple punches before Minwoo clutches Skyla's shirts and breaks down into tears, saying that he never wants to see him again. Staring at his crying face, Skyla realizes that no matter how many excuses or apologies he makes, it's not going to bring them back to the way they were before. After the fight, rumors started spreading about Skyla being gay, texting a much older man, and even confessing to Junho, who's this guy. In the classroom, Junho is making a story about how Skyla confessed to him. When Skyla comes in and beats him up, Junho, of course, doesn't let this go and beats him up in return after school. The next day, Skyla gets beaten up in a bathroom before Minwoo breaks them up and tells them to hurt him in a way that doesn't show on his face, otherwise it could cause problems. Junho and the other men get the hint and begin to strip Skyla's clothes off. As Skyla gets sexually assaulted by Junho, Minwoo just stands to the side and doesn't bat an eye to what's going on. After the assault, Skyla starts to isolate himself and gets mistreated at school. His mother notices his strange behavior and out of worry calls Minwoo's mother to ask what's going on. Minwoo's mom tells her about the bullying, and later that night, Skyla's mom comes up to him and lifts his shirt up to see the bruises on his stomach. Skyla wakes up and gets into a fight with his mother about going to Minwoo's house to get an explanation, and as a last resort, Skyla runs to the edge of his balcony and threatens to jump off as his mother goes to Minwoo. Skyla's mother immediately calms down and tells him that she won't go as long as he doesn't jump, which he doesn't. After Skyla graduated, his family moved to a different city and Skyla went to a different school, where he met Chanel. As Chanel kept hanging around Skyla kept seeing Minwoo in him and began to hate him because of it. But as time went on, as Chanel kept getting closer, Skyla began to realize that he didn't actually hate him. Skyla realized that the reason why he fell for Chanel was because he couldn't stop projecting Minwoo onto him. Through Chanel, Skyla wanted to resolve any guilt and regrets he had about his mistake. We fade back to Skyla walking with Chanel in present day, where Skyla promises to himself that one day he will tell everything to Chanel and quietly apologizes. Chanel, having not fully heard, asks Skyla what he said, to which Skyla brushes it off and questions herself if he can be selfish with Chanel's kindness for a little longer. Next day, Skyla is put into the same presentation group as Cyrus and a couple other classmates, and after deciding who does what part of the presentation, Cyrus goes home and plays with Candy. He decides that it's time to work on his presentation, and as he's looking over the documents, he remembers the brief conversation he had with Skyla. Recalling the question that Skyla asked him, Cyrus replies to himself that he doesn't want anything from him and throws the flash drive away. Cyrus goes to his tutoring school, where he finds out that his usual friend isn't there. He goes to call her, and the conversation turns from a simple question to a full-on mockery on Skyla. Cyrus calls him a wacko and tells his friend how awkward it is to be in the same class as him when the other gets called away. The two end the call, and as Cyrus is walking back, two students bump into him, causing him to spill his drink. But instead of getting angry, he lets the two off and sadly curses them out to himself. Cyrus later comes home to Jusu being blackout drunk and blasting music, which he ignores and goes to his room. In his room, he notices that Candy is missing and starts running around the house looking for her. When he goes downstairs, he asks Jusu to turn off the music and then throws a vase when he's met with silence. Cyrus goes to look outside, but after finding no trace of Candy, he questions Jusu. She laughs at Cyrus before telling him to go on his knees and beg if he wants to see Candy again. He hesitates for a moment, but then obediently sits on his knees, which displeases the mother. For some reason. Fed up with her nonsense, he grabs her hair and starts to threaten her, but gets interrupted by his father slapping him. After a few good slaps, Jusu breaks them up and tells him that she took Candy to the vet. But as Cyrus is sitting on the floor, his father kicks him out. Bloody and bruised, Cyrus runs around to various veterinary clinics to find her. Finally, he finds her and then breaks down, stating that if he ever lost her, he really couldn't. He's glad he's found Candy, but then realizes he can't go back home and decides to leave her for a few days at that inn and Ritten's apartment. Left alone on the street, Cyrus wants to sleep on a bench, but after getting disturbed by the police, he hides in a playground. Since he doesn't have any money, he thinks about calling Chan-il for help, but instead calls Skyla. Skyla comes and kicks the slide Cyrus is in while angrily reminding him that it shouldn't call out of the blue. We get one of the most beautiful panels where Cyrus is looking up at Skyla while realizing that this was the luckiest and unluckiest day of his life, as well as a beautiful shot of Skyla's face. Cyrus gets up and starts walking towards Skyla, but then bends over and tells him that he's starving. The two go to a convenience store, and as Cyrus is loading up his basket, Skyla stands to the side and judges him. When the two get to the cashier, Skyla looks over and tells Cyrus to pay up, to which Cyrus finally tells him that he has no money. Skyla, left with no choice, removes some of the things from the basket and pays, leaving him broke. Skyla begins to leave, but Cyrus begs him to stay and drags him over to an outdoor bench. As Cyrus is eating, Skyla analyzes his appearance and determines that Skyla ran away from home. He decides that he's going to leave when Cyrus is done eating. When Cyrus notices his stare, Cyrus suggests that Skyla eats, but Skyla declines and cleans up the table. Putting on a pathetic act, Cyrus asks if he can stay over at Skyla's place, which Skyla reasonably declines. As Skyla begins to leave, we get more manipulation from Cyrus. Cyrus brings his phone to his ear and calls Chan-il, causing Skyla to freeze. Taking advantage of his petrified body, Cyrus walks over and hovers his phone in front of Skyla's ear while telling Chan-il that he has something interesting to show him. Skyla almost shits himself from fear and very reluctantly brings Cyrus home. Walking in, Skyla tells Cyrus to be quiet, and after realizing how filthy he is, tells him to wash up. Cyrus complies, and as he's taking a shower, he thinks about the way his father looked at him the same way he did when his mother died, making him scratch the wall in anger. His line of thought breaks when Skyla knocks on the door and tells him that he's got a change of clothes for him. Cyrus opens the door with only a towel on his head, letting the situation turn into the equivalent of...
Hang up that computer call, come over here and kiss me on my hot mouth. I'm feeling romantical.
Later in the night, Cyrus is unable to fall asleep and begins to tell Skyla about his life, including the amount of stepmothers he's had, how he got kicked out by said mothers, and how every time a new one would come, until Juicy took the spot. Cyrus glances over and notices that Skyla wasn't listening and confronts him about it. Skyla replies that he doesn't really care about Cyrus's life and that he didn't ask in the first place. He just let him blabble for no reason, basically. Cyrus breaks into a laughing fit at his response before changing the topic and asking Skyla to talk about himself instead. Fed up with his shit, Skyla walks towards Cyrus and lists off the things he's been doing for him that night. He came out late at night because he asked him to. He took him to his apartment because he told him he had nowhere to go. He listened to Skyla's life stories even though he didn't care. He tells him to stop asking him to do things and reaches for the glasses, and as he does so, he sees Cyrus shed a tear. Skyla hesitates for a moment and takes the glasses off him. Laying back down, Skyla tries to play off what he saw by telling Cyrus that his situation is hard enough without him adding problems to it, and he goes to sleep. The next morning, Cyrus heads to his house and formally apologizes to Jisoo for being rude. Jisoo takes the apology well and strokes his face while urging him to get along the way they did before. Cyrus later goes into his room and throws things around when he realizes that Jisoo set him up for failure from the very beginning. He suddenly remembers the flash drive and runs over to the trash to take it out, saying that he can't lose it. After finding it, Cyrus lays on the bed and stares at it as he muses that Skyla was the first person he ever told about himself. He wonders why he did that, and slowly realizes that Skyla isn't interested in anything about him and therefore has no expectations and won't be disappointed in him. He now understands that Skyla is the only person he can be himself around. That's why he went looking for him. That's why he was so angry when Skyla tried to keep his distance, and why he was so relieved when Skyla showed up. From this, Cyrus possessively decides that Skyla will always have to stay by his side. Next day at school, Skyla is half asleep and is deeply regretting bringing Cyrus over to his house, when the man of the hour himself comes in. Some classmates gather around him and ask why he's late, to which he brushes it off as a doctor's appointment. Cyrus notices Skyla and smiles for him through his mask. Shocked, Skyla turns his head away and questions why Cyrus did that. A few days later, Cyrus sets up cameras all around his house to try and catch Jisoo in the act of setting it up, and promising that when a day like that comes, that would be the day that he gets rid of her. Meanwhile, with Skyla, as he's studying at the co-studying space, he thinks about how he can't fail his finals. As he's motivating himself to study, his phone starts to buzz. He goes outside and answers the call to his sister, excitedly telling him that a friend came to their house to visit. As Hyun is describing the person, Skyla realizes that it's Cyrus, and his expression changes to that of when you see two girls, one cup for the first time. He tells Hyun to not trust Cyrus and that he'll be home in 10 minutes. With that, he hangs up the phone and rushes home. Skyla wastes an extra 10 minutes on the bus but remembers the power of the human body and decides to run home. We cut to Cyrus sitting in Skyla's room and looking through his bookshelf. He notices Skyla's yearbook and flips through it, but gets disappointed when he sees that Skyla's appearance hasn't changed much throughout the years. Skyla bursts through the door to find his mother and Cyrus sitting together at the dinner table. The two greet him, and upon seeing Cyrus, Skyla passively aggressively tells him to get out. Cyrus gets the hint and goes to leave when Skyla's mother suggests staying over for dinner, but Skyla is quick to decline and push Cyrus out the door. Outside the apartment, Skyla relaxes and asks Cyrus why he came. However, Cyrus ignores the question and suggests going on a short walk. As the two walk, Cyrus begins to explain that Skyla's mother noticed him when he was leaving the other day and, complying with Skyla's requests, he wanted to make sure if she had seen his face or not, which she hadn't. Skyla questions Cyrus if he said anything absurd to his mother before abruptly realizing that the conversation they're having is way too normal. He tries to shoo Cyrus away, but the other takes out the flash drive and hovers it in front of his face, telling Skyla that he can have it back. Skyla swiftly snatches the flash drive from his hand and puts it into his pocket while asking if Cyrus kept a copy, which Cyrus replies that he hasn't. This is suspicious. Skyla asks him what made him change his mind and give the flash drive back. Cyrus teases him and tells him that it was probably because they spent the night together, making Skyla cringe. Cyrus laughs it off as a joke before leaving, making Skyla confused. After the flash drive donation, Cyrus goes to get candy and thanks Dad in again for taking care of her. As he's walking home, he notices a leaf resting on Candy's head. He laughs a bit as he finds it cute and takes a note of how nice the day is. He thinks about how excited Skyla must be to have the flash drive. Meanwhile, Skyla is eradicating the flash drive's existence. He drowns, crushes, dismantles, and finally pushes the destroyed circuit board to the bottom of the trash, when Hyun comes in and asks about what he's doing. After masking it as a lost pen, Hyun asks him to warn her next time Cyrus comes, so that she'll make herself look more presentable, to which Skyla reassures her that there will be zero chance that she'll ever see him again. Back at school, Skyla is hosting a club meeting and asks one of the members to bring some printed photographs for the school festival. This doesn't really matter, this is just a hint that the festival is coming up. Switching to Cyrus's perspective, he notices that both the maids are working that day and questions it. One of the maids replies that his father was the one who requested it for Jisoo's comfort, making Cyrus ask about her whereabouts. While Jisoo is eating, Cyrus sits by her and antagonizes her. But once met with no reaction, he splashes the juice he was drinking all over her food. Angered, Jisoo asks to clear the table and heads to their room. A couple days later, Skyla and Jung-hoon search through Donsnik's locker for an item he had let him borrow. Don't know who Jung-hoon and Donsnik are? Sorry, I have a habit of forgetting to introduce characters. Donsnik is the guy who Skyla asked to bring the printed photographs for the festival. He and Skyla are in the same photography club and are friends, somehow. While Jung-hoon is this guy. I think this is the first time we see him. Or not, maybe one time at the school trip. But he's also one of Skyla's friends. They're both Skyla's friends, but they're not exceptionally relevant. Got that? Good. Moving on. As the two complain about Donsnik's incompetence, Cyrus comes up behind Skyla and stands there, staring at Skyla as if waiting for him to notice him. This creeps Jung-hoon out, and while Skyla is complaining to him, he doesn't reply. Skyla notices this weird behavior and is about to ask, when Cyrus pulls at a strand of his hair and tells him that it's grey. Skyla is naturally appalled and tells Cyrus that he's joking, which Cyrus confirms that it's just lint. While the two are talking, Jung-hoon leaves. When Skyla notices him gone, Cyrus asks if he's okay with humoring his friends by giving them things, but Skyla replies that it's fine because they're friends. Skyla gets his usual one-in-a-millennia awakening and realizes that there's no more reason for him to be talking to Cyrus anymore. He tells Cyrus a baddie comeback and leaves. Donsnik, Jung-hoon, and Skyla go to the bathroom after eating lunch to brush their teeth. There, Jung-hoon asks Skyla if he's good friends with Cyrus, and Skyla immediately tells him no. Jung-hoon then asks Skyla why him and Cyrus were together so late that night, but Cyrus quickly clears up the misunderstanding and tells him that he just ran to him on accident. Jung-hoon explains that he went to the same elementary school as him, and while they weren't in the same class, he had heard plenty of rumors about him. Apparently, one of Cyrus's stepmothers had come to one of the school events. However, she looked too young to be his mum. Not only that, but a different woman would appear as his mother at school events every year. People began to speculate that he didn't have a mother, which is true. There was a kid, Hyung-snik, who would harass Cyrus about the situation. Jung-hoon felt bad for him because of it. Then, one rainy day, Jung-hoon left his umbrella in the classroom. He had run back to get it, but as he was running there, he saw Cyrus and Hyung-snik in a confrontation. However, he couldn't make out what either of them was saying. Hyung-sik turned around to go down the stairs when Cyrus pushed him. Jung-hoon explains that he'll never forget the way Cyrus stood there and watched as Hyung-sik cried in pain before going to get the teacher. He goes on to explain that when he saw Cyrus again in high school, he could barely recognize him, adding that his acts feel fake and unnatural somehow. Jung-hoon asks the other two to not tell this to anyone else. Skyla agrees and says that he isn't close to Cyrus anyway. With that, the trio return to class, but unbeknownst to them, someone was listening on to their conversation. Later in class, Skyla recalls noticing Cyrus shed a tear when he took his glasses back. Then, he recalls Jung-hoon saying that Cyrus was like a totally different person now. Skyla remembers how much he's changed since middle school and looks up at Cyrus and silently states that no matter how hard you try to live like you're someone else, you can't change who you are. During lunchtime, Cyrus and his friend group sit together to eat. After a suspicious question from Jiwoon, one of the friends, Cyrus stops listening to them and diverts all his attention onto Donsnik. Donsnik? Yeah. Hearing Donsnik complain about his mother not buying him some new earbuds, Cyrus sticks out his foot a little and trips Donsnik over, embarrassing him. Donsnik turns his head, believing that something tripped him, but having noticed nothing behind him, he rethinks it as his imagination. While in a classroom, Skyla gets approached by two freshmen and gets informed that Donsnik still hasn't given them the photos they need. Skyla apologizes, and after a few jokes from the girls, he goes to Donsnik's class to lecture him. Donsnik, too preoccupied with his arm, gives a hard reply, making Skyla worry if he actually heard him or not. Later, while Skyla is in PE, Donsnik slips into his classroom and places the printed pictures onto Skyla's desk. When he notices his wallet. Curious, Donsnik checks it and is astonished by the amount of cash Skyla carries with him. Flabbergasted, Donsnik takes a couple of bills into his pocket with the hope that he can buy some new earbuds, when Cyrus walks in on him. Skyla comes back to find a notice he nagged Donsnik for laying on his desk and decides to bring them over to the freshman. He delivers them before heading to lunch with Donsnik and Jung-hoon. As the three are eating together, Skyla asks the other two what they're talking about, but is met with a strange stare from the two. They drop the conversation and brush it off as an uninteresting topic to Skyla. Skyla notes how odd their behavior is and that they've been leaving him out of their conversations lately. He begins to become anxious as he wonders what could have caused them to become so distant suddenly. On a rainy day, Skyla asks 𝐙music if he's mad at him. 𝐙music tells him no. However, this only reaffirms Skyla's suspicion that something has changed. As Skyla is walking home, he tells himself that he isn't dense and that he can see when someone is trying to distance themselves from him. He then begins to wonder if maybe the problem is that there's something wrong with him and remembers the fight that happened between him and manwha. Skyla begins to cry, confused as what to do. Next day, as Skyla stands outside the photography club, rooted in place, as a panicked thought follows another, 𝐙music comes up behind him and asks him if he's ready to go inside. Hearing the question, Skyla gets nauseous and tells 𝐙music to head in without him while he runs to the bathroom. In the classroom, 𝐙music and 2 other classmates are playing a video game they were preparing for the school festival. 𝐙music scolds them about it and orders them to prepare everything before turning to Skyla and wondering why he hasn't said anything about them yet. During lunchtime, Skyla is eating outside when Cyrus sits next to him. Cyrus questions Skyla about why he's not eating in the cafeteria, then follows it up with a question about his friends, causing the other to turn silent. Seeing the other's unresponsive behavior, Cyrus tells him that he's better off without them. When Cyrus finishes talking, Skyla suddenly remembers how his mother decided to cancel his doctor's appointments. Turns out, when Cyrus visited Skyla's house, Skyla's mother asked Cyrus about how Skyla was doing in school. Cyrus told her that he was smart and friendly, everyone got along with him, and the teachers were fond of him as well. Having heard the good news, Skyla's mother was relieved and was even willing to cancel the appointments if Skyla really didn't want them. Next day, Skyla starts studying at his usual co-studying space, but after realizing how packed it is, he goes to a library. Confused by some questions, Skyla almost ends up falling asleep and goes to a convenience store to get a snack. As he's paying, our favorite group of 𝐙music, 𝐸woon, and Yu-chan come up to him and after some small talk, suggest studying together. Skyla agrees and the 4 head back to the library to study. While the others are silent, Skyla mumbles to herself about how stupid he was to agree and how awkward the situation now was. 𝐸woon notices Skyla's self-degrading mumbling and questions how hard the problem he's working on is. He goes over to Skyla and starts explaining the problem to him. Once he's done, Skyla thanks him and suddenly gawks at how good 𝐸woon is at maths. As 𝐸woon goes back to his seat, he tells Skyla to ask him if he needs any help. Jealous by the favoritism, Yu-chan asks 𝐸woon why he's never this nice to him, to which 𝐸woon replies that it's hard to be nice to a dumb person. This causes the two to start some banter, which Skyla mistakes for insults. 𝐙music tells Skyla that this is just how they talk to one another since they're so close. This causes Skyla to think about manwha and him, and how it's been 2 whole years since he's hung out like this with people. After the group has dinner, Skyla tells them that his house is the other way and that he should be heading soon. After some hesitation, the group lets him leave and 𝐸woon invites Skyla to study with them again. The trio begins to leave, saying their farewells to Skyla. Skyla watches them leave, a surprised look in his face, as he tells them that he'll see him tomorrow. At lunch, as his friends are talking about various things, Cyrus asks 𝐸woon where 𝐙music is. 𝐸woon explains that he's eating lunch with Skyla until it's time for the festival. Then he proceeds to tell Cyrus about how the 4 of them have been studying together at the library. Cyrus then abruptly leaves to go looking for them. He dashes frantically throughout the entire school looking for Skyla, almost similar to how he was looking for Candy. He eventually stops, not being able to find them in any room he looked in. As he's walking down the hall, he spots them outside. Cyrus immediately flings the window open and watches Skyla as he smiles and beams as he walks with 𝐙music. Cyrus scratches the wall in complete irritation, similar to what he did in Skyla's bathroom. Seemingly seething from jealousy, Cyrus asks why it has to be 𝐙music. A week passes and it's the day of the festival. Cyrus reads the instructions about the festival to the class and gets ready to leave, but gets stopped by 2 classmates. As a way to promote their booth, they give Cyrus a perm and draw hearts on his face. Cyrus steps into his clubroom while covering the marks, but his hands get soon pried off his face and everyone sees the hearts. His other members tell him that it looks too festive to remove, and proceed to urge him to hurry on and put his apron, as the other groups have already started. Cyrus complies and grabs his apron. However, as he does so, the entire football club watches him. Confused, Cyrus unfurls the apron to see that it's a traditional maid apron. Yu-chan explains that they're short on aprons and that the apron he's supposed to wear is their last year's manager's. Cyrus decides to take off his uniform instead of wearing the apron, however, his club doesn't let him. They grab Cyrus and force him into the outfit. After talking to his club advisor, Skyla runs into 𝐙music in the halls and tells him that the snack shop is closed. so the two decides that it's better to get a few bills from the football club. Back in the football club, Cyrus is looking submissive and breathable as he's trying to take the frilly apron off. Eventually, he gets it off, but Chan-il and Skyla walk in on him. The two stare in shock for a moment before apologizing and leaving. Completely furious, Cyrus throws the apron into the trash. Outside the school gate, Rin, Cyrus' best friend, tells Cyrus that she won't be coming to his festival. However, she's actually about to go inside with Yeonji. End of season 1. My god, that was long. Let's move on to the review. The plot. There's honestly not much to say about the plot because the more confusing shit happens in season 2. Was it right to force Cyrus to force a kiss onto Skyla? No, but that's more of a problem with his character rather than the plot. So far, season 1 is seemingly trying to make us feel sympathy for Skyla, considering the amount of time this man embarrasses himself. While on the other hand, Cyrus is made out as some possessive hidden motive antagonist in the story, considering the fact that he literally blackmailed Skyla for 47 chapters. I'm sure that Cyrus is just heavily traumatized because of his backstory. That's only shown in season 2, by the way, and that's why he acts that way. But I do wish we got some more insight on his background or personality, like why he feels the need to put on a good persona, for example. By the way, this isn't me defending Cyrus. I still have beef with him, a lot of it. This is just me sparing myself from a few extra death threats. But yeah, there aren't that many complaints about the plot for me. But one question, was it necessary to drag out the main plot with the flash drive for 47 chapters? I'm sure that there were definitely more than enough times where Skyla could have snatched the flash drive back. Like, when the two fell down the stairs, he could have snatched it back. Or when Cyrus called Skyla at night, Skyla could have suggested helping him if he gave back the flash drive. Of course, I'm sure Cyrus wouldn't give it back, but that was a possibility. But again, there's not much to say since this is the first season, so I'll let it slide. The characters. I can't call any of them particularly good so far. Like, sure, Skyla has a lot of trust issues and mental issues because of his trauma, but that doesn't mean that you should get on your knees and cry for a person that you don't even know. The way I see it, his whole personality is based on his dorkiness and sensitivity. Like, this motherfucker cries almost every other chapter. It just gets annoying at some point. He's also a walking contradiction to himself. Even after Skyla got and destroyed the flash drive, he still talked to Cyrus. Sure, most times it was against his will, and at some point he even recognizes her, but Skyla could have left and avoided Cyrus at any point like he said. There was no need to speak to Cyrus on the bench. Skyla just could have gone up and left. There was no need to continue speaking to Cyrus after that grey hair joke, which thankfully Skyla didn't. What I'm saying is that this man does not know how to pick the right people to be with. Oh, except for the study session he had with Chan-il and the others. I'm glad to see some slight development and changes in his friendship. Good for him. Cyrus is unhinged. No, that's too tame of an adjective. He's fucking deranged from humanity. No, he's not a cutie patootie. He's a future psychiatric hospital patient. Not only did this man force a kiss onto Skyla, which I'm never letting go, he blackmailed, mocked, tormented, exploited, and as a cherry on top, manipulated Skyla. And after all of that, he still wants Skyla to be all his and becomes very possessive. And no, that's not romantic or cute. That's unhealthy, obsessive behavior. Also, like, after 40-something chapters, this man finally realizes that maybe to befriend someone, you have to be nice to them? Like, if anyone starts talking about his backstory, I do not care. Just because you had a bad childhood does not mean that you get to exploit people. Cyrus does not need Skyla. He needs a white robe and a therapist. Chan-il, I don't know, and I kind of don't care about him. He's nice. He's kind. He acts like a puppy. That's kind of it. Same thing about the side characters. Some are bitches, some are funny and better, but I don't care about them enough to write a paragraph. The romance. Where was it? Again, this is just season 1, so I'm not expecting some full-on dick and balls makeout content, but I sure as hell do expect some consensual and reciprocal romance. Please. Like, I can definitely see some infatuation from Cyrus' side, if you can call it that, but Skyla just wants nothing to do with Cyrus, and honestly, as he should. If you over-romanticize manipulation to the point where it looks like true love to you, then sure, like this relationship. But as a person who believes in more or less healthy relationship dynamics, I just can't see them working out together. Cyrus constantly manipulates and tricks Skyla into helping him just because of his love for the other, all while mocking him too. But Skyla just mocks him. If at least one of them mocks with love, then the other doesn't want anything to do with him, and it shows. These unrequited feelings do bleed into season 2 and confuse it, but hopefully the romance in season 2 is a little better. Because so far, it's really not that good. Originally, this video was supposed to include both season 1 and season 2. That's why this outro is so abrupt. But since both parts were very long, I had no choice but to split it. Gotta have some mercy on my mental health, you know? Either way, I'm currently working on the second video and will try my best to upload it soon. In the meantime, please consider following my socials or drinking a cup of tea while you wait. Thank you for watching. Okay, bye. I'm taking a nap.